Welcome to Food for Thought podcast. Today's episode is staying healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally during a pandemic. Before we begin, my name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Welcome. You can find me at joyfulvegan.com and on social media. Thank you for subscribing to Food for Thought wherever you listen to podcasts, and thank you for sharing it with others and for supporting it. Food for Thought, as you've heard me say, is a 100% listener-supported podcast, and support is dangerously low. You may notice there are no ads in this podcast. There are no sponsorships other than listeners. I don't partner with companies on social media to sell their products. I just create content I believe is valuable to you, my listeners, my readers, and my followers. And that's who supports it in return. So if you would like this podcast to continue, please join other listeners in supporting it by going to patreon.com/Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Perks are available at various levels, but the biggest perk is knowing that I am dedicated to inspiring and empowering you to live as compassionately and healthfully as possible. You can also just go to joyfulvegan.com. Click on the donate button. You'll find the link there. Thank you so much in advance. We are going to be talking about silver linings as a way to stay mentally healthy during a pandemic. And one silver lining through all of this for me, and hopefully for you, has been the online vegan cooking classes I've been teaching in real time every week. The classes are interactive. They're super fun. You meet like-minded people. You get the recipes in advance so you can cook along with me if you want. You don't have to. And you get a recording of the class at the end. If you can't make a class, you can purchase the recipes and that cooking video at the end. Well, as soon as I get it up. And I have some up already. So you can go to joyfulvegan.com. You can see the past cooking videos and recipes for the Mexican cooking class, Middle Eastern cooking class, the Italian cooking class. There's one that I'm missing, and I'm adding more all the time. Each class itself has a different theme, as you can hear, and we've got some really fun ones coming up, including homemade tofu. Yeah, like not just recipes for tofu, but actually making tofu from scratch. And if you are interested in that class, it's going to be a big one. You can use the discount code INSTA. I offered this originally to my Instagram followers, INSTA, INSTA, when you go to register for the class, and you get 5% off. So check that out. I'm probably going to be adding other homemade tofu classes because I think it's a really popular one. So I think it's going to be a big class. We've got homemade bagels and breads coming up, homemade pizza coming up this week. So check it out. And we've got some new classes. I have the Joy of Vegan Baking, and we're focusing on chocolate for the first one. So we're doing like chocolate bundt cake, chocolate fudge, some other chocolatey things. I'm doing an afternoon tea focused on sandwiches. We're doing an eggless egg salad with watercress, cucumber dill with cream cheese and chives, and a roasted red pepper with arugula. And we're doing an afternoon tea focused on scones, for which I'm also teaching you how to make lemon curd and also aquafaba whipped cream. All vegan, all plant-based, all delicious, all compassionate, all animal product free, and super fun. So go to joyfulvegan.com/classes to register. There is a discount when you buy the 3-class package. So many students do that, which means you will see a lot of the same people in the classes, which is a lot of fun. And I'm really grateful to be teaching them at this time. And I'm so grateful it's filling a need to help all of you. It's one of the ways I am definitely staying healthy during this pandemic. It's definitely one of the ways that I'm staying healthy mentally and emotionally. It's been really healing for me, and I know it's been really healing for a lot of you as well. So I hope you're doing fabulously well. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, how to stay fabulously well during a pandemic, though you can apply these thoughts and suggestions to your life even when there's not a pandemic. And, you know, I did an episode not that long ago specifically on dealing with anger and anxiety during the pandemic. This is a little different. This is not presuming you're angry or anxious. It's just about how to stay healthy. And again, that means physically healthy and also mentally and emotionally, because we will talk about stress. I mean, you might not be angry, but you may be experiencing stress and strain during this time. I'd be amazed if if you're not feeling any of that at all, or just it might come in waves. So that's what we're going to address today. One of the more popular episodes of mine as of late was one from a few months ago called 50 Habits for a Meaningful Life. And I encourage you to take a listen to that because I think a lot of those habits can also be incorporated at this time and at any time to deal with, especially with what we're dealing with right now. Now, there are many ways to approach this topic. I want to get into the nitty-gritty right away. So we're going to talk about staying healthy physically in order to avoid getting the virus in the first place. We're going to talk about how to get healthy if you do get the virus. And we're going to talk about how to stay healthy emotionally and mentally during the pandemic, just in general, because we are all mentally and emotionally affected by living during a pandemic, which I suspect none of us really have experienced this before. This is about self-care. It's about self-compassion, which leads to more resilience. It leads to improved resistance to disease. It leads to enhanced self-esteem and increased self-knowledge. And all of those are good things. All of those arm us against just this stress and strain of everyday life. It also means when we prioritize self-care and self-compassion, that we're better able to take care of others. After all, we can't give what we don't have. So this is going to, when we take care of ourselves, when we stay healthy, physically, emotionally, mentally, it means that we are better able to care for others. So if you don't like the idea of self-care, I'm trying to give you a reason to reframe it so that you see that self-care also fosters other care. Okay, so whether you are a friend or a coworker or a parent or child or caregiver, if you're in the medical profession, if you're a nurse, you're a doctor, if you're an animal advocate, if you're an activist, whatever, staying healthy physically, mentally, and emotionally will benefit you. It will benefit the people and the animals and the causes you care about, okay? So let's address the easy and the obvious, or maybe I should just say the straightforward aspect of staying healthy, and that's avoiding contracting this virus in the first place. We do have agency in terms of avoiding it if we follow what the experts recommend. Now, I'm going to warn you right now, you are not going to hear far-fetched theories here. You're not going to hear outlandish claims or cockamamie suggestions. I'm not going to tell you to eat an apple and go vegan and you won't get the COVID-19 virus. I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to tell you to drink concoction every day and that will keep you guarded against COVID-19. You're not going to hear that here. You are going to get the same honest, truthful, reasonable, common sense approach you've always gotten from me and that you should expect from me by now. But just search the internet. I'm sure there are plenty of other people who will tell you, that there's one thing you can do. And if you are only doing this one thing, you can avoid getting COVID. Take this potion, take this class. I don't know. I try to avoid that in my life. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to avoid COVID-19. And obviously, the experts have learned, the infectious disease experts have learned a lot more about this virus as time has gone on. They're still learning. And while I'm no expert, I have said from the beginning that this is a contagious respiratory disease, which means there are things we do know about how to avoid getting a contagious respiratory disease and obviously and spreading it to others. So all that's to say is this is not a boogeyman that is going to attack you in the middle of the night and infect you when you're not looking. You can't get the virus unless the virus can get to you, and you can't infect others if you're not infected yourself, right? Pretty simple that. So how do we avoid getting it in the first place? Number one, stay home. Right? Just don't come in contact with other people. Now, I'm not telling you to do this and never leave your home. And obviously there are gray areas. But my point is, if we don't have contact with other people, then it's pretty unlikely that we are going to get the virus, right? So if we don't have to leave our homes, and so just broadly speaking, if we're not essential workers, then the best thing we can do is shelter in place. and stay home to reduce contact with those outside our households as much as possible. The American Journal of Emergency Medicine put it very simply: staying home saves lives. That includes your life. That includes the life of people you care about. That includes the life of someone you don't know, but staying home saves lives. If you don't come in contact with someone who has it, and by now you've most likely learned that asymptomatic carriers are the primary transmitters of the virus, so you can't know that someone has it or doesn't have it just by looking at them, then if you're not coming in contact with someone who has it, and you can't tell from just looking at them, it's unlikely you're going to get it. So staying home, avoiding people outside of your immediate pod, as it were, the people you live with, is a pretty good way to avoid getting infected, and then obviously to avoid infecting others. So that's number one. Number two is physically distance. If you have to leave your home and come in contact with others because you provide an essential service, if you're in the medical industry, if you deliver food, if you deliver packages, if you work in a grocery store, you own a grocery store, if you're in food production, if you work for a utility company, if you're a contractor or an electrician or a plumber, or if you work in social services, a social service organization or a nonprofit organization, then the best thing to do is to keep a safe distance from others. I prefer the term physically distance rather than social distance because it's more accurate. And because we don't have to socially distance from each other, we can still socially engage with each other. And this can be done in ways other than in person. And so we do have to physically distance from each other when we're out and about. Now, experts are still recommending at least 6 feet as that safe space, which is about 2 arm lengths. And the data are pretty clear about the fact that COVID-19 spreads less when outside. So when you do see others, remain outside. Now, we go to the farmer's market every week. We have been going to the farmer's market down the street from us, and even some other farmer's markets up the street from us, every week since the start of this. I'm very grateful that our farmer's market, like from the beginning, they just put a lot of systems in place to keep everybody separate. Masks are required at the farmer's market. And they had this whole system in place, which has worked really, really well. And we've been going every week since the beginning. And we take this virus very seriously, but we're outside, and the data have confirmed this as more time has passed and more data has been collected, that being outside is the best thing we can do, not remaining in a space for a prolonged period of time and staying several feet apart. So we do that and be masked as we're outside. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So being outside does make a difference. So number 1, stay home. Number 2, when you leave your home, physically distance from people who are outside of your pod. Charlie, this is not your podcast. It's not. Now it's Michiko. Michiko's not your podcast either. Goodness gracious. So number 3, don't touch your face, or more specifically, don't touch your mucous membranes, your eyes, inside your nose, or your mouth, especially after you've touched a public surface. Now remember, the coronavirus is not a boogeyman. It can only infect you if it gets inside of you. It can't pass through your skin. It can only replicate in live cells in the outer layer of your skin. Obviously, that's all dead cells. So having the virus on your hands is a problem, right? It's your skin, which is dead skin. It's not going to get through via your fingers. But if you take those fingers and you touch your eyes, your nose, your mouth, then it's going to get inside of you. It's going to get into your lungs. And it can only do this by finding a way into that moist lining, right, of your mucous membranes, which is your eyes, your nostrils, and your mouth. So don't touch your face, but I guarantee you will touch your face. I touch my face all the time. Studies show that we touch our face on average 20 times an hour. I'm pretty sure I touch my face even more than that. And half of that time, now it's not every single time, but half of that time, we're touching our mucous membranes. So we're touching our mouths, mostly our mouths. Of all of those mucous membranes we touch, it's our mouths. We touch our eyes, and we touch inside our nose. We don't have to get into that, but we touch inside our nose. So since it's unlikely that we will really be able to avoid touching our face completely, the next best thing to do is, yes, number 4, Wash your hands frequently and sanitize your hands often. Now, I talked about this a little bit in the podcast episode on plastic pollution during a pandemic, but the best way to disinfect your hands is to wash them with soap and water. The CDC recommends washing for at least 20 seconds and making sure you don't miss washing the fingertips, the thumbs, and the backs of the hands, even up to the wrist is what many of them recommend. You don't have to do it in hot water to properly disinfect. You can just use cold water from the tap or room temperature, but use soap. You don't need a special soap. You don't need a special antibacterial soap because COVID-19 is not a bacteria, it's a virus. So any soap will do, including all natural soaps. Apparently, it's soap molecules that dissolve the protective coating around the virus, this fatty protective coating. So the soap molecules dissolve that protective coating, making it less capable of surviving, and then rinsing your hands off with water after breaking down the virus's coating removes it from your skin completely. So just regular soap will do, and be sure to rinse well. Now, this is what I talked about in the plastic episode. If soap and water are not readily available and hands are not visibly dirty, like really grimy, then use a hand sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol. Now, if hands are visibly dirty, they obviously recommend washing with your hands with soap and water. But if you're mostly, it's to consider hand sanitizer a backup and a temporary measure until you can wash with soap and water. Hand sanitizer should not be a replacement for washing with soap and water. So I talked about this in the plastic episode in the context of we went 6 months, April, May, June, July, August, 5 months, but we've never even had it ever before buying hand sanitizer. So I just got some in an aluminum. In fact, Plain Products, which is, I've talked about them in zero waste episodes regarding it's all in aluminum packaging, and you send the packaging back to them when you're finished with your shampoo or your conditioner or your face lotion or whatever it is you get, or your body lotion. Now they have a hand sanitizer, which is fantastic. And so I was able to find a hand sanitizer, one that was in, I think both were in aluminum. In fact, yes, both were in aluminum. But now I just found out recently that Plain Products, Plaine products also, and I think it's plainproducts.com, has now a hand sanitizer. So it's great for a backup, but it's very rare that I'm so far away from soap and water that I have to rely only on hand sanitizer, but it's just a backup. And in the meantime, I try not to touch my hands or face. And by the way, if you go to joyfulvegan.com and you type in Plain Products, Plaine, or zero waste shampoo, you will find a blog post that includes a link with a discount code to get a discount when you purchase Plain Products. So that is something that I can offer you. They're not sponsoring this episode, but it is something that I arranged with them a long time ago so that I can share this company that I love with you, and I can also give you a discount. So go check that out. Now, a caveat regarding household cleaners. Now, experts recommend plain old soap for washing the virus off of hands, but they do recommend using more than that for cleaning virus-contaminated surfaces. And I say that specifically because they have, they're virus-contaminated surfaces. The EPA has issued a list of disinfectant products that meet the criteria for use against COVID-19 or really any coronavirus, including other kinds of pathogens like Ebola and that kind of thing. So they have a particular list of disinfectant products to use against COVID, but we use natural cleaners at home, and we're going to continue to do so. I'm not going to go out and, now this is just me personally, my comfort level. Everybody has a different comfort level. We don't live we're not a hospital. We're not a public space, right? We don't have to worry about making sure that our surfaces are constantly disinfected against potential virus pathogens because different people are coming and touching all of these surfaces in our home. It's me and David who live here. So we feel comfortable in terms of just using natural cleaners still. However, as you've probably seen if you follow me on social media, we have had friends over for socially distanced, physically distanced dinners and for drinks. And we serve them food and beverages on plates, and we give them glasses and we give them forks, right? And They also go inside our home. They have gone and used the bathroom since all of this. And again, when I say they, we have had only 2 friends at a time so that we can easily distance. We're usually about 10 feet apart when we host them for dinner. We set up 2 different tables. We're at one table, they're at another table. It's worked really well. And what we do though is that we do share. We don't share them at the moment, but we do let them use our plates and our forks. We take those plates and forks in as soon as everybody's done. We put them right in the sink. We wash our hands, and obviously we wash all of those things and wash our hands continually. But if they go in to use the bathroom, of course they're touching doorknobs. Presumably they're touching the toilet flush handle as well as faucets. And these are the kinds of things that experts recommend we sanitize properly. The things that we come in contact with most regularly, things that we don't even think about, right? Banisters, doorknobs, faucets, elevator buttons, light switches, that kind of thing. So is it enough to use natural cleaners to wipe these down when our friends have been here? Well, the experts are saying no. They're saying that we should use a disinfectant that meets the Center for Disease Control's, the CDC and the EPA criteria to kill pathogens such as COVID and flu and Ebola and Salmonella, etc. Now, while things have changed in this crazy COVID world, and I know many of us have made exceptions, buying single-use plastic, for instance, because that's the world we live in right now, I personally don't feel like I need to go out and get an EPA-approved disinfectant cleaner that may not be cruelty-free, and that would most likely come in a plastic container. Now, if I had to, I would do it. But I just follow the same protocol I mentioned. I wash my hands, and I avoid touching my face before I do. Now, while people who manage public spaces have to make different decisions and can't afford to do otherwise, I can. If we have friends over, and by the way, this happens like once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, maybe once every 4 weeks. It's not like every day, but we can manage it when people come into our own home. And I tend to open doors with like a cloth anyway. And we try to be mindful. We take this virus very, very seriously, but we also don't obsess, and we do what we think is reasonable while taking COVID very seriously and while avoiding getting this disease, because we don't want it. Like, we just don't want it. So we do what we think is reasonable. And, there are times when we've done something and we've sat down afterwards and we're like, I don't know, I think we can do that differently next time. I wasn't really comfortable with that or whatever it is. So let's do it differently next time. That's something we assess every time as well, because, hey, there's no handbook for this. We're all trying to figure this out. And as I said, we all have different levels of comfort as we're going through this. Having said that, it's worth noting that the time the virus seems to live on different surfaces ranges from about 24 hours on softer materials to up to 5 days on harder surfaces such as metal, plastic, and wood. Some experts say that it remains for a longer period of time on certain materials, up to 2 weeks. We usually just consider about 5 days. But again, I just want to be really clear. We take this very seriously. And our comfort level was not such that when we had packages delivered, we left them to sit for, days at a time before touching the box. We just didn't do that. Maybe we were careless, but we just washed our hands after we touched everything or anything. So just, again, being mindful, being thoughtful, being careful, being vigilant, and then we all draw our own line. David just took Charlie out of the room while I'm recording, and he just pushed the door open. He's trying to push the door open to come back in. Anyway, okay. So that's number 4, is wash your hands frequently. I can't emphasize that enough. Number 5 is wear a mask. A mask may not protect the wearer, but it may keep the wearer from spreading the virus to others. So COVID-19, as you know, spreads mainly from person to person through respiratory droplets produced when a infected person, I'll say infected person, obviously, coughs, sneezes, talks, or raises their voice, right? And so there's spittle. Now, these droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby or possibly be inhaled into the lungs. And because recent studies show that a significant portion of individuals with COVID-19 lack symptoms, are asymptomatic. Even those who eventually develop symptoms or are pre-symptomatic can transmit the virus to others before showing symptoms. So even if you don't think you have COVID and thus think you are not going to spread it to others, you may have it. And so wearing a mask in public when you're in contact with people outside of your household and when other physically distancing measures are difficult to maintain, wearing a mask helps stop the virus from spreading, period. Now, at this point, most of us have several masks. So do switch them out when you go out in public again. Don't touch the mask itself. It's recommended that you take off the mask by the straps, not the main surface of the mask, and that you wash the mask with soap and water right away. And then you wash your hands with soap and water right away as well. On some recent live videos on social media, I talked about how difficult it has been for me to find masks that fit me because every mask I have bought that doesn't have tighteners, like it's huge on me. Like I don't think my face is particularly small, but every mask. So like I would often get masks that are unisex. So I would get a mask for me and a mask for David. So mostly all of the masks I got for both of us, he would get because they wouldn't fit me. So I'd have to go get new masks. And then I started purchasing masks specifically that had tighteners on the straps. But now I figured out, I watched a YouTube video, how to create these really simple knots in the straps. So the ones that I got for myself, I can wear now, and I'm really excited. But I would touch the mask itself a lot because on the outside, which is what they recommend against, because they were always falling off of me. So again, washed my hands whenever I got home from doing that. But now I don't have to worry about that as much. So those are some low-level things we can do to avoid getting and giving COVID-19. Stay home, physically distance, wash your hands, don't touch your face, and wear a mask. In addition, avoid large gatherings of people, especially if everyone's not wearing face coverings. Limit time with others to shorter durations. If you go outside or see others, gather outside, or if you go outside your home, I should say, or see others, gather outside and physically distance and wear a mask. And if you were in a public place, I wasn't going to include this, and I thought, no, I really need to include this. If you are in a public space and you need to use the public restroom, close the lid before flushing, and then, of course, wash your hands with soap and water. Modern flush toilets, I don't know if you've seen some articles about this, but they aerosolize up to 145,000 droplets of toilet water into the air, which can float around for at least 30 minutes. And so COVID can spread this way because it lives, in the contents of the toilet. So close the lid, flush, and then wash your hands. Now, what about some higher level things we might be able to do? What about nutrition? What about boosting our immune system? Are there things we can do for our health overall to avoid, prevent, or lessen our chances of getting sick from and or dying from COVID-19? Here's what we know for sure. Charlie pushed his way in. He did. He pushed his way in. Oh my God. Ready? Charlie. His little paw, oh my God, is under the door. I'm gonna go get him. It's funny. It's like with a child. Like he's more disruptive if I try and lock him out of the room than if he's in the room. So I think he'll stop moaning and he'll just settle down. But anyway, thanks for your patience. So here's what we know for sure. And I'm taking some of this straight from my friend, Dr. Michael Greger, specifically in the phrasing of things. But this is what most of the experts are talking about in terms of COVID-19 severity being based on pre-existing conditions. So, okay. People with high blood pressure are twice as likely to suffer a severe course and 3 times as likely with cardiovascular disease. So those with either condition are about 4 times likely to end up in the ICU. Those with what is technically termed a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease like emphysema, they appear to be at the highest risk, 6 times the odds of a severe course and nearly 18 times the odds of ICU admissions. That's pretty serious stuff. As with SARS and MERS, those with diabetes appear to be at higher risk. Excess body fat also seems to be a risk factor. Those with a body mass index, a BMI of 28 or more, appear to have nearly 6 times the odds of suffering a severe COVID-19 course. The average BMI in the United States exceeds 29. So again, 29 or more, you'd have 6 times the odds of suffering a severe COVID-19 case. Even without taking weight into account, most adult Americans over 50 suffer from, this is crazy, most adult Americans over 50 suffer from a comorbidity that may put them at risk. Now, it's important to note that the major comorbid conditions for COVID-19 severity and death, obesity, heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, may all be controlled or even reversed with a healthy enough plant-based diet. So that is straight from my friend, Dr. Greger. And we know this. I mean, we know this just in general, that when we have these underlying diseases or conditions, we are more prone to suffer not only from those conditions, but also other extenuating circumstances. So in terms of the impact of nutrition, just now more than ever, of course, we should be ensuring wider access to healthy foods. That should be a top priority in terms of policies, in terms of government policies. And of course, in terms of what we can do individually, we should be prioritizing healthy eating and healthy foods. It should be top priority for us as well, so that we can just help mitigate the long-term complications of COVID-19 and reduce the susceptibility to COVID-19. Turns out centering your diet on healthful whole plant foods was the best thing before COVID. It's the best thing during COVID, and it will remain the best thing after COVID and before the next pandemic, because there will be another one. So yeah, like it's just that, like this isn't anything new. So I'm not telling you to do anything differently than what has been suggested in the past. Like, this isn't like, okay, when this is over, then we all have to go back to, like, when this is over, really over, said and done, like gone, disappeared, done, we won't have to wear masks. Okay. When this is all said and done, we should continue eating healthfully, because it's going to be the thing that helps us in every way. So this isn't new. It's just old. It's old news is what it is. Now, while that's true, I really do caution against espousing veganism and being vegan and eating only plants as a way to avoid COVID. Vegans get COVID too. A healthy vegan is still susceptible to COVID-19, and I think it's terribly unproductive and irresponsible to make it sound like being vegan is a shield against this deadly virus. If you're vegan and you're healthy, you're less likely to have the underlying conditions like heart disease and diabetes and high blood pressure, but you're still human and you're not immune to viruses like COVID-19. Now, if you come down with COVID, does being vegan mean that you're better able to avoid the severity of the disease? Yes, it does. It does appear to be the case, and that has a lot to do with having a strong immune system. So it's another reason to take care of yourself. Because a strong immune system isn't just from what you eat. We'll talk about some of the things that boost your immune system, but obviously eating well, eating lots of whole plant foods, and avoiding eating animal flesh and fluids. It's going to be the best thing you can do to really boost that immune system. Why? In terms of not eating animal flesh and fluids? Well, again, the more you're eating whole plant foods, the more you're eating the foods that do boost the immune system. You're not going to find those things in animal flesh and fluids. Here are just a few additional things experts recommend, obvious though they may be, to avoid getting COVID and lessening the severity of the disease if you do get it, while also lessening the impact on healthcare workers in general, because that's something to consider as well. Don't smoke. If you do smoke, quit. I say this as an ex-smoker. I smoked a long time ago. Do you know that? Talked about it in a long ago episode, but yeah, I get it. It's hard. It can be really, really hard, but don't smoke. And if you do smoke, quit. The other thing the experts are recommending is getting the flu vaccine when the season comes. I will tell you, I've been a healthy vegan for 21 years, but the last, 5-6 years, I got the flu really badly every winter. And it was really annoying because we tend to travel around the holidays in the wintertime, especially for the group vegan trips that I host, the CPG trips. So last year, 2019, David and I both got the flu shot for the first time in, I don't even know, 20 years or something. And neither of us got sick. It was the first year in many years that we didn't get sick during flu season, and it was glorious. And we will do it again this year. Not only does the flu vaccine lessen the chances that we'll get sick and lower the severity if we do get sick, it also means that we're less of a risk to the population, or a population that's more vulnerable than we are. So getting vaccinated against the flu is recommended unless you live completely alone on an island and you don't ever come in contact with anyone else, and if you don't mind getting the flu. That's not us. So we got the flu vaccine last year and we'll get it again. So what if you do come down with COVID-19? Before we move on to the other ways to stay healthy during a pandemic, specifically related to our mental and emotional well-being, let's go over what to do if you do come down with COVID. This will be very fast. A very dear friend of mine recently came down with COVID. Luckily, she has recovered. Her husband never got it, or hasn't yet. I mean, he wouldn't get it from her now. It's way past the time that he would have gotten it. They live in a very small apartment in San Francisco. And luckily he didn't get it, but she did. She works in a nursing home and she is extremely careful, and they take all sorts of precautions. And yet, if any of my friends was going to get it, it was going to be this particular friend because of the work she does. So her symptoms were pretty common: fever, muscle aches, chills, fatigue, loss of appetite. Some people also cough up phlegm. They suffer gastrointestinal symptoms such as nausea or diarrhea, or they have common cold symptoms like a runny nose and a sore throat and a headache. And I just saw an article today about, I think all of us have experienced like a runny nose or a cough and think, oh my God, do I have COVID? Like, I don't know if you've experienced that, but I certainly have. And I've made some video calls to my medical practitioner. There are lots of medical practitioners doing video calls these days. I use One Medical, and they've been doing it. They saved me when I was traveling in the last couple years. So even before COVID, I was using these video calls, and they've been such a lifesaver. But I have made a couple calls, and I think all of us are doing that. So there are ways to assess, and of course, it's suggested that if you have, if you're really concerned, to call your doctor, but really the symptoms that are the things to be most concerned about, and you should be calling emergency, is if you have trouble breathing, if you have persistent pain or pressure in your chest, if you have new confusion, if you are unable to stay awake, or if you're unable to wake up, and if you have bluish lips or bluish face. If someone you live with or you experience any of these more severe symptoms, it's recommended you call emergency right away. But if there are symptoms you feel, hopefully you'll be able to just call a medical practitioner and just check in and find and see what they say. So assuming you have symptoms you can take care of at home, the following is recommended by the CDC and other medical experts. Stay at home. Isolate as much as possible from others in your household. They suggest, being cordoned off in a sick room. It's not going to be possible for everybody. Rest, hydrate, monitor your symptoms. Obviously, as I said, if you experience difficulty breathing, call emergency. Practice good hygiene. Practice physical distancing. Wash your hands often. This is something we should all be doing. Cough or sneeze into a tissue, or cover your nose and mouth, and then throw the tissue into a lined bin. Immediately sanitize your hands. Don't share towels and bedding, etc., with people you live with. If you are sick but you have to share a room with someone else, they suggest wearing a face mask with people who you live with. That's, again, it's to protect them, not necessarily protecting you, but protecting them. And as you start improving, if you're fever-free for 3 full days, which is what they consider improving, then you can start tapering off of medicines. But obviously you'd be getting advice from your medical professional, not me. But those are the suggestions that the CDC is making at this time. And so obviously contact your medical professional if you do have any symptoms you're concerned about. So I hope that helps in terms of avoiding COVID in the first place and dealing with it once you get it. The truth is, folks, I think we're in this for the long haul. I personally, I'm not going to predict, but this isn't a prediction, but I'm surmising that this is going to go on for a couple years before our lives go back to any kind of normal, whatever that new normal is, until there's a wide availability of an effective vaccine We're looking at staying at home, physically distancing, wearing a mask in public, gathering in much smaller groups, traveling less, if at all, right? I mean, that's what it looks like. This is going to last longer than any of us wants, than any of us wishes, or any of us ever dreamed of. Now, we're not taking the measures we should be taking to force COVID-19 to commit suicide, right? We're not taking the measures to stop spreading it. So this is the new normal until and even after we get a vaccine, right? Will we have a vaccine as quickly as experts are touting and as quickly as many people are hoping? I mean, only time will tell. But keep in mind that the average time for developing, testing, approving, manufacturing, and distributing vaccines is about 10 to 15 years. I think the mumps vaccine was the fastest developed and fastest approved vaccine, and that took 4 years, and that was exceptional. And frankly, I'm no expert, as I have said before, but I don't think it should be a rush job. I want this frickin' virus to go away, to be gone and out of our lives, but I also want scientists to get this right and not rush it, right? Because obviously that could be harmful and it could be ineffective, and this will just give people a lot of false hope. But the name of the US government's initiative to develop a vaccine is called Operation Warp Speed. That doesn't sound very cautious to me, but who am I to say? I want this vaccine to go away, but I'm also not putting my life and my dreams and my hopes and my aspirations on hold until it does. I'm busy living now. And while I do have a healthy fear of the virus and I am taking precautions to avoid getting it, I take it very seriously. And I want to avoid getting it, and I don't want my loved ones to get it. I'm going to keep on living. And I want to be able to look back at this time, because this is a game changer, right? This is a game changer. Like this, I think some of us thought this was going to go away in a month. This is a game changer. We are living in history. This is a historical time. Most of us have never lived through anything like this before, not affected like this day to day for this length of time, not like we're affected today with COVID. So I want to be able to look back on this time and be proud of how I lived. I said in a previous episode that the stress and strain of all of this has created a pressure cooker. I talked about it in the episode about anger and anxiety, the pandemic, the loss of life. Over 160,000 Americans are now dead from COVID-19. The lockdown, sheltering in place, unemployment, loss of housing, loss of income, loss of our regular lives, confronting for the first time in centuries. I mean, really confronting centuries old racism and racial injustice. And then, of course, the protests following the murder of George Floyd. Any one of these things was enough to create stress and strain, but all of it together, I mean, for your sake, I hope you're not feeling any stress or loss, but I'd be really surprised if everyone isn't feeling just a little. And then, of course, some are feeling more than others. So because this is a public health issue and we are each part of the public, it's up to each of us to do our part to slow the spread and hopefully stop this thing in its tracks. It's also up to each of us to manage our own psychological response to living through this difficult time. How do we do that? Well, everyone is different. Everyone responds to different things, but I hope some of what I'm about to recommend helps a little bit, helps maybe one of you or some of you a little bit. But first, I want to stop and give a shout out to all of you for your support, especially to Brooke Boussard, Michael Stone, David Cabrera, and Alexander Gray. As you can see, the number of platinum supporters has shrunk. So those are my platinum supporters, and I thank you so much. And I thank all of the new supporters. We have Deborah Stein, Molly Mithag. Oh, how am I going to say that? Molly Mithog Cook. Molly, forgive me. Molly Mithog Cook. That's right? Kristen Bailey DeMello, Lauren Uller are some new supporters, and I want to thank all of you at every level. I mentioned in the beginning that support is at an all-time low, and I'll just say it again now. If you're looking to support a small vegan business, you kind of can't get much smaller than me. It's just me. Like, this is it. I put up every social media post. I write every podcast episode. I create every class menu. I put up each of the classes and create all of the Zoom rooms and recipes these documents and marketing posts, and I teach every class and I edit each podcast episode. For better or for worse, it's just me. And that doesn't even count all of the other, just admin aspects and just everything that you can imagine is required for running this small business. It's just me. And I don't take money and create sponsored posts. I don't take money from podcasts, for podcast sponsors. I don't have investors. I don't have donors. I'm not a charity. I have you. I have my audience who, according to you, values this work. Here's an email from a listener I received recently. She's not a Patreon supporter, but I wanted to read her letter anyway to emphasize the fact that when you support this work, you're also making it possible for those who aren't supporters to consume it. So it is literally value for value, and it is literally a ripple effect. So she wrote, "Hi, Colleen, I hope this finds you well. I just wanted you to know that during this time of isolation and social distancing, I've been going back and playing podcasts of yours that I've missed. And I loved the Favorite Countertop Appliances podcast. It's almost like having a friend here in person in my kitchen or wherever I am in the house with me as I go about my daily routine. I think this situation is really starting to get to people. And I know I can occasionally get a glimpse of depression at the doorstep, wanting to get a foothold and enter." Okay, I'm going to cry because this is exactly why I did this episode. "Listening to you, a kindred spirit who shares my views, has been helpful. I find myself nodding and agreeing with your voice and thoughts. So glad to hear someone who is like me. The only people I know who are vegan are myself and my husband. It's such a foreign idea to everyone with whom we come in contact, even as they're suffering from obesity and reversible health conditions. As a nurse, I find this particularly frustrating. We live in Western Massachusetts and have a co-op and a Whole Foods not too far from us that gets it, but Peter and I are, in our little circle, definitely considered a little crazy with our way of thinking and eating. When we went zero waste, well, you can imagine. We're not preachy at all. We stand as an example, and if people ask questions, we're happy to answer. I'm saddened that people can't think beyond their stomachs and plates and need for immediate gratification and ease and see the bigger picture. Sometimes humanity or lack thereof makes me cry. Thanks for all you do. We will continue our compassionate lifestyle and refer people to your website, books, and podcast. Maybe someone within our realm will one day have that aha moment and take that step to improve their lives and the lives of animals." This was supposed to be a quick little note. Sorry about that. Love and health to you and yours, Amy Nizio. Did I say that right, Amy? Thank you. And they will have aha moments. I promise you. Just keep doing what you're doing because that's what's right for you and because it is the right thing to do. And people will be inspired by that. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you. Read The Joyful Vegan again and read the chapter on letting go of expectations. I know it's hard, but all we can control is ourselves. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the second half of the episode here. And you are doing such a fabulous job controlling what you can. And so kudos to you. And thank you so much for listening and for sharing that with me. It means everything to me. You have to know that. So if anybody listening right now is getting anything out of this podcast or my work in general, and you want others to as well, please become a supporter. I can't say it more clearly than that. $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, or $1 a day for $30 a month. Everything helps. As my patron, you receive discounts for things like the cooking classes. So I gave you the Insta 5% off just for being a listener. But if you're a supporter, you get more of a discount. But that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it, I know, because you are getting the quality content that I've always been committed to. And so I'm grateful. And I will stop pleading. But you can visit patreon.com/Colleen Patrick-Goudreau, or you can just go to joyfulvegan.com, click on the donate button, and thank you in advance. So to take that analogy, right, you supporting my work means I'm able to support you back value for value, right, through my content. And it also means that I'm able to support others, right, who are touched by my work, right? So value for value. So too does taking care of ourselves have ripple effects on everyone around us, not just us, because we are all in this together. Not just this pandemic, but this life. If The pandemic didn't demonstrate how connected we are and how much we depend on each other and how much we need each other and how much we crave being with each other. I don't know what would. And that's my first thought for coping emotionally and being healthy emotionally and mentally through this, is that number one, we are all in this together. Keep that in mind. One of the things that Amy said in her letter was, she said, just hearing that someone else understands me, or just hearing me in someone else's voice, that means everything to us, right? So you are not alone through this thing in particular, this pandemic. There's not one person who doesn't understand what it means right now to struggle through this pandemic or through this life, but truly, specifically, this pandemic. You know how it feels when you go through something difficult. Maybe it's a relationship breakup or the death of a loved one or the loss of a job or a physical ailment or a sickness. You really want to talk to someone who's gone through that too, right? You know how that is a thing, right? Just knowing that someone else can relate to what you're going through, that's really helpful. Just sharing common experiences with someone else who can identify with you, alleviate some of that pain and distress. That's why there are support groups for so many different, like, specific things, right? There's a shared connection that makes it easier to cope, and it makes you feel less alone. It makes you feel less anxious. It makes you feel less discombobulated. I think that may have been the first time I spelled out discombobulated when I was writing this episode. I don't think I've ever spelled it. I never wrote it out. So just know that whatever you're feeling right now, someone else has felt them or is feeling them. There is nothing unreasonable or unmanageable about how you feel related to this pandemic. So if you need to talk to a friend or anyone, reach out. They will understand. But if you want to talk to someone professionally, I know a lot of people who are using like virtual therapy right now, and a lot of therapists are taking online appointments and doing virtual therapy. You do not have to hold your breath and wait for all of this to go away to feel better. Address whatever anxiety or just stress that you're feeling right now by reaching out to someone who will understand, and everyone around you will. You are not alone. Okay. So number one is just know that. Number two is acknowledge that this is difficult and be gentle with yourself. Even if you're not experiencing something like acutely traumatic, like the loss of a loved one or loss of a job or loss of housing, this has been traumatic for everyone. As I said, like, right, just not experiencing the normalcy of what our lives once were can definitely lead to a sense of grief. Right. So just acknowledge that. You don't have to turn into a puddle, right? This isn't about just, oh my God, this is horrible. It doesn't have to be horrible. That's another one of my points that I'll be making soon. But you also don't have to be a rock, right? Just, you can acknowledge that this is hard. And that also doesn't mean you're acknowledging that it's always going to be, right? It's not going to, it doesn't have to be hard every day. But if we are feeling the stress momentarily, just acknowledge it. The worst thing we can do is deny what's real, deny what's in front of us. So just acknowledge it when you're having a harder time. Identify it and then move on, right? Decide how to respond. I'm listening to my own advice because I'm someone who tends to plow through. When I've identified that I'm stressed or anxious or burnt out, I tend to plow through and just keep going and not stopping, and that's not good. So don't take that advice. But once you identify the difficulty or the strain or the stress, while that may be enough, it's probably also best to just stop what you're doing, walk away, and decompress however you decompress. It might just be walking away from just that moment, from whatever you're doing that moment. But it could be reading, walking, hiking, running, whatever, meditating, stretching, drinking. I'm just kidding. But actually it's true. I think some would agree that a little cocktail now and then can take the edge off. And we've been to a lot of wineries, again, just me and David, and doing the whole physically distancing thing here in California. I have to say the wine industry, the alcohol industry is doing just fine throughout this. And I can't say that we're not helping them, because we have enjoyed our wine throughout all of this. And David, as you know, is making cocktails at the end of the cooking classes. So, but I'm not giving drink as my advice to you. Okay. It was just a little joke, but truly try to switch gears when you acknowledge that you're having a rough time. Acknowledge that you're having a rough time, switch gears, and that alone will recalibrate you, okay? So number 3 is adjust your expectations. I do predict that our normal lives will not resume for a couple years. Whether we get herd immunity from infected individuals or through a vaccine, it's going to take time for things to normalize, like a while. And even after that, I think there's going to be long-term effects. I'm pretty certain we will be a changed society, in some ways for the better, in some ways, well, we're going to have to see if they're for the worse, but we will be different. We are different already. In other words, expect that this will last longer than you may have already thought it would. Expect that things will be different even after it's over. Expect that things will go wrong and stay wrong, and then adjust your thoughts and behavior accordingly. Nothing that happens in the world is within our control. It's outside of us. It's how we respond to what happens in the world that is in our control, as I said to Amy, right? And this pandemic is no different. In fact, we should expect more pandemics. We should expect illness, war, discomfort, misery, loss. We should expect death. All of that is outside of our control, but how we respond to each is within our control. There's a principle in Stoicism, or it's a Stoic exercise called premeditatio malorum. That's Latin for the premeditation of evils, right? And it's a Stoic exercise of imagining things that could go wrong or be taken from us. And what it does it's not about being morbid, and it's not about being pessimistic. It helps us prepare for life's inevitable setbacks, right? So you don't just sit around going, everything is going to go wrong all the time, and see when it happens, we're justified in feeling pessimistic. That's not what it's about. Like, I am the least pessimistic person you can imagine, but I prepare for things that could go wrong. Seneca, for instance, who was one of the most, we have a lot of his writings. He was a Stoic, and we have a lot of his writings because of the letters he wrote. He would, for instance, begin his day by reviewing and rehearsing his plan, say before he was taking a trip. So he wrote, "Nothing happens to the wise man against his expectation, nor do all things turn out for him as he wished, but as he reckoned. And above all, he reckoned that something could block his plans." So by doing this exercise, Seneca was prepared for disruption. He was prepared he literally worked it into, he built disruption into his plans. He was ready for defeat, or he was ready for victory. So we may not be able to predict that a boat we're on is going to sink, right? We can't control the captain. We can't control the water. We can't even control the condition of the boat, but we can wear a life jacket, right? We can be prepared. Like, we can prepare ourselves just in case. So if you get on a boat and you think, oh, it's all going to be fine and nothing's going to happen. If you get in your car, right, you wear your seatbelt because of what could go wrong, right? That's what it means to have to practice premeditatio malorum. So we may not know when an earthquake or another natural disaster will occur, but we have an emergency plan in case it does, right? So that's what premeditatio malorum is, the premeditation of evils. It's our emergency plan based on our expectations. So that is number 3. Adjust your expectations and create your own premeditatio malorum plan. Like, that is literally what we should be meditating on every day. Number 4, take this time to establish new healthy habits or strengthen existing ones. If not now, when? I love the saying, when is it the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago? Well, when's the second best time? Today. So just start. Healthy habits, like we talked about in the habits episode, healthy eating habits, healthy communication habits, healthy exercise habits, healthy relationship habits, whatever habit you've been meaning to cultivate or start, or even habits you've been meaning to break, now is the time to do so. If you didn't start them 20 years ago, if you didn't start them 2 weeks ago, if you didn't start them yesterday, start today. So take this time to establish new healthy habits. Number 5, eat healthfully consistently. Now, this is different from the suggestion I just made, because establishing healthy habits is not just eating, right? So, but that's why I wanted this one to be its own. Eat healthfully and eat healthfully consistently. I'm not saying eat healthfully perfectly. I'm saying eat healthfully consistently. So eat as, foods that are in highest nutrients as possible. Make whole foods the foundation of your diet. That doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. It means you're going to just do it the best you can, right? Because it's going to be best for you in the short term. It's going to be the best thing for you in the long term in terms of coping through this time. And because you'll be doing it consistently, you will inevitably, invariably develop these behaviors as habits. They will become habits. And we all know ourselves better than anyone. So just be honest with yourself about where you are and how you can eat better, how you can eat a little healthier, and find ways to create patterns so they become habits. Number 6, practice good sleep hygiene. Allow yourself enough time to get adequate sleep each night. Create an environment that promotes rest. It is so important, right? It's so important. So make sure before you go to bed, you also avoid habits that can adversely affect your sleep. Again, everybody knows themselves really well. So if drinking alcohol before bed affects your sleep, don't drink alcohol before bed. If having a difficult conversation with someone before bedtime, okay, now Meech goes in the room, affects your sleep, then don't have a difficult conversation before bedtime. Michi, oh my God, I have to not close my door before I record a podcast. That would make everything easier. So everyone's different. Know what you need. Know what works for you. I need 7 hours of sleep to feel rested. I have to get Meech go. Okay, I think everyone's in now. And unless David starts banging down the door, I think we're safe. I think we won't have any more interruptions. So, as I said, David needs 8 hours or more. I need 7. I love waking up at 5 o'clock or 5:30 in the morning. David wakes up around 7 or 7:30. So we just adjust accordingly. Like, just know what you need. I know my body. I know how much sleep I need. I know when I'm going to feel too tired the next day. So I do what I can. So know what you need and honor that. If you're someone who naps during the day, honor that too. Do what you need to feel rested. Number 7 is stay active. And this is also different than create healthy habits because, again, exercise is just one of those healthy habits. But exercise is key to maintaining a healthy mindset. It releases all those happy little neurochemicals in your brain that allow you to release stress. So here's one of the many things that's going to release stress for you. And that's what we're talking about here, is how to create these healthy habits to be healthy during a pandemic and after a pandemic and before a pandemic, because we're always kind of in between. There are so many classes online these days, so you don't have to join a gym. You don't have to go to a gym. And of course, people are not going to gyms right now to get a workout, to get exercise. This is a time when many people are getting home gym equipment, even if it's bands or weights or mats, and then they're taking classes online. Many classes are free and many classes are paid. And so if you value the expertise of the person you are taking a class from, I've done classes where I start with just the free, just to kind of check them out. And then I pay because I really value the expertise of the person I'm learning from. So consider that as well. But, if we can check a lot of stuff out for free and then go from there. A lot of people have treadmills and bikes that they're dusting off at home. You can also work out outside. I've seen many neighbors set up a little gym area in their yards. This is one guy down the street. He has this whole he has a mat and weights outside, and then he does sprints, and then he's doing squats, and he's doing all that outside. And I just walk on the other side of the street when he's doing that. But that's great. I have another neighbor who has a stationary bike in his garage, and he just opens the garage door. So just do whatever you can do to get active. Of course, running or hiking or cycling or walking outside. Of course, walking just outside is the best exercise you can get if you don't want to work out at home. or you can't work out at home. And of course, being outside in the fresh air is going to be the best thing for you mentally, emotionally, and physically. So that is my next piece of advice, is just get outside, spend time in nature. You don't even have to worry about working out. Just get outside, get among the trees, get among wildlife. Landscapers are in high demand right now because so many people are trying to create outdoor spaces in their homes to compensate for not going out elsewhere, not traveling. So even if you don't have an outdoor space, go to a park, hit the trails, go to a lake or a pond or an ocean, whatever's near you, safely distanced from others, of course, and just breathe in some fresh air. It is, for me, it is the number one stress reliever for me. Just, I don't know if you know, like I work outside like most of the day. I mean, I am outside all day. Yes, mostly working on my computer, but it's also my stress release. So I have to be outside. It's my sanctuary, just being among the trees. That's why we moved into this house 100 feet up from the street, is because it's a tree house. Literally, we are among the trees. We are above the trees, and it's everything to me. So I'm not presuming that you feel the same way as I do, but you know, some people are attracted to the ocean, some people are attracted to water, some people are attracted to the desert, whatever it is. But just being outside is incredibly healthy and something I really recommend. Number 9 is create a special space in your home. I talked about this in the Habits for a Meaningful Life episode. Carve out a special space in your home so that you feel grounded, so that you feel rooted, so that you have just a sacred space that you can go to that's all your own. Contractors are also in high demand right now because people are renovating their homes because they want to create these spaces for themselves. Also because many people are working from home now, so they're creating home offices or home, like nooks, so that people can work from home. And I think that's what we're going to see as a lasting effect for sure. People are commuting less. They're relying on home offices. I think 100 years from now, future people are going to see the evidence of this pandemic in houses that are built or renovated to accommodate people working from home. I think that is definitely something we're going to see. And it also means that we're needing to find ways to separate our personal and our business lives. So that's essential too. So create a special space in your home for personal space, keep it separate from work. Like I said, I'm outside all the time, but even I have to get out. Even I live in this little sanctuary that we've created here. And even I'm like, I need to get out. I need to go to go to a different place. And we've created that in our home, and David's working from home now too, which has been fantastic, but it's also forced us to kind of work differently and find our own spaces in the home so that we can just find some solitude, because it's so important, so helpful for staying healthy during this time. Number 10, this is not the first time I'm saying this, practice gratitude. Numerous studies have found that people who write down or even just consciously think about what they're grateful for tend to be happier and less depressed. Keep a gratitude journal or do it in your head every day. We can be grateful for the tiniest thing. We can be grateful for the largest thing related to this pandemic or not. We have so many things to be grateful for, right? Even right now. Even living during this pandemic, here are some things to get your list started. Number 1, many of us continue to be safe and healthy. Number 2, the majority of COVID cases are mild. That's something to be grateful for. COVID-19 is far less lethal than many pandemics that different people have had to deal with in the past. Another thing to be grateful for is that this pandemic has enabled us, forced us, allowed us to spend more quality time with family than we might not otherwise have done. Communication and information is faster and more accessible. We're able to get really helpful information in real time because of the access to communication and information that we ever had before. And then, based on this knowledge, we can make decisions and things that are healthy to flatten this curve, even though I'm grateful that we have that information, but we're not all taking that information. Some of us are, and I'm grateful to those who are. we can be grateful that people are working from home and commuting less and driving less, which has meant fewer accidents with each other, fewer animals being hit by cars, and less pollution. So I'll let you add your own. You can create your own gratitude list. You don't need me, but there are so many things to be grateful for, even in this crazy time. So what I'm going to do is encourage you to hit pause right now and just name 5 things. Name 10 things. Forget 5. Name 10 things you are grateful for right now and say them out loud. You can write them down, but hit pause and name 10 things right now out loud. Gosh, I just love the idea of this collective gratitude moment that all of you listening, thousands and thousands of you listening right now, are going to collectively express some gratitudes. Do that right now. I'll wait. Okay. And we're back. So welcome back. Number 11 is explore new hobbies. Broaden your horizons. Use this time to create mini challenges for yourself. And again, there's lots of evidence that, kind of like sparking new interest in things is therapeutic. So create little challenges for yourself. Create some new hobbies. If you've been meaning to read all of Charles Dickens' novels, do it. If you've been meaning to watch all of Aki Kaurismäki's films, which is what we're doing right now, do it. If you've been meaning to learn a new language or try your hand at needlepoint or gardening or cooking, whatever it is, what are you waiting for? 20 years ago was the best time to start. Today is the second best time. There will be no better time than right now to start a hobby or create a challenge for yourself. Do it now. Do it with a friend. I've been challenging myself. There's lots of things I'm doing. One of the things I'm doing is challenging myself to make things from scratch that I've been meaning to do and wanting to do for so long. And 2020 will forever be the year that, yes, we dealt with this pandemic and other terrible things happened. But it will forever be the year that I cracked homemade tofu. Learning to make tofu from scratch. That alone has made this a good year. So, and then I'm able to take that and share it with you in my cooking classes. So how cool is that? So explore new hobbies. Number 12, it's kind of related to gratitude, but find COVID silver linings. I kind of named a bunch of them in the gratitude list there, but there are lots of reasons. There are lots of silver linings. Again, I feel like I just named a bunch of them, but there has been terrible inconvenience and trauma and loss and sadness, but that's not all there has been. So what are your COVID silver linings? For me, it's been the cooking classes. For me, it's spending even more time with my husband, who I love, and he now works from home every day, and we spend a lot of time together. It's been connecting with friends far away because we're making more dedicated time to have Zoom happy hours. I've been keeping a photo journal, on Google Photos, of screenshots of Zoom happy hours that we've been having with longtime far away friends. Another silver lining for me is I've been wanting to get more involved in animal issues locally, and I am quite literally helping build an organization. Yggdrasil, many of you have seen me do some wildlife rescue releases. Yggdrasil is an incredible wildlife rescue and rehabilitation organization here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And they're amazing and they're so needed, but they have no structure in place because they're just spending all their time. I say they, it's Lila, one person spending all of her time actually rescuing animals. And so I have been working with another friend, and we have just been basically putting all the structures in place to create an organization. And it does take a lot of time, but it's been incredible because it's so needed. There's nobody else taking care of wildlife in the East Bay. And so it's been really gratifying. And I just, I've been wanting to do that. And this is just the time I took to do that. And so I know she would say that's a COVID silver lining for her, is because we came along at this time and she was just ready to completely pack it in because she's just completely burnt out. So what are your COVID silver linings? I really encourage you to create them, and perhaps they'll just be part of your gratitude list. I think I'm on 13. I don't know how many. I think we have 20. So 13 is, I really encourage you to set boundaries with media and social media. Just step away. I think, there's this notion that you have to read the news every day to be engaged in what's happening in the world, but you don't at all. One of the things I will tell you that I'm doing a lot of is I talk about history. I'm reading a lot of presidential biographies, which has been just so incredible. I'm just absolutely in awe of and in love with Ulysses S. Grant. So I highly recommend Ron Chernow's biography called Grant. Cannot recommend it more highly. It is just absolutely incredibly written, and Grant will be your new hero. He is mine. And so that's what gives you perspective, is history. You don't have to read the headlines every day, which are there to make you nuts. So step away from the news, step away from social media, get off your phone, get off social media, get off the internet, read a book, take a walk, take an online course, cook, bake, talk, write, just do something, get away from media, create those boundaries for yourself, whatever they look like. When I say get away, I don't mean for a year. I mean, maybe it's a day, maybe it's an hour. Create your own boundaries with media, and social media is number 13. Number 14, give back. I don't know anything that makes me feel more rejuvenated than actually giving back to the things that I care about. And so I mentioned Yggdrasil. I volunteer once a week at Maine Coon Adoptions. I, socialize rescued cats. I've been doing that now for almost 2 years, and something I used to do a long time ago. And it's incredibly gratifying. If you follow me on social media, especially on Instagram, you'll see every Thursday I post pictures of the kitties. I'm cuddling. I'm a kitty cuddler. I just love that name. I love being a kitty cuddler, and it's incredible. I absolutely love it. Like I said, building up the organization for Yggdrasil, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. And of course, I keep talking about voting, and I'm volunteering with Vote Forward to write letters to encourage people to vote. Fostering has been something that came out of COVID. That's another COVID silver lining for me, and that's been really incredible. Right now, my office is actually in disarray. Ironically, it's been in disarray for most of COVID. We were remodeling my office because it really needed it. It's like the last room in the house that's getting renovated, and just because of COVID, it slowed everything down. So my office has been an absolute construction zone, and so that's been a bummer. But I guess it hasn't been all of COVID, has it? Because I did foster some cats during COVID. So yeah, it's been the last few months, but once the room is back in order, I will foster more cats again. So give back. What do you care about? What organizations might need your support, might need your help? Could be time, it could be money, but just giving back is number 14. Number 15 is find new ways to connect with others. As I said, we need other humans. That's so apparent. Now, I know that a lot of people are getting tired of being online. People don't seem to be tired of being on social media, but people are on Zoom a lot, and they're doing a lot of meetings online, and you can totally get burned out from that. But you can pick up the phone. I have been making phone calls and talking to friends on the phone, which is just weird and different and amazing. So you can definitely connect with friends on the phone. You don't have to be on the internet to do that. Start writing letters and cards to friends and family. Start I'm blanking on what it's called because it's been so long. Letter writing chain? What the heck am I thinking? A pen pal. Be a pen pal with a friend. But just there are ways to connect with each other that doesn't require being in person. When you are in person, as I said, we've been doing these dinners, and they've been really working for us. It's really funny that one of the things that was a stressor for me, which is really, I know sounds really weird, but one of my stressors when COVID happened, and especially as months were going by, was not entertaining. I entertain a lot, and I love to nurture people through food and through just socializing in our home and hosting parties and hosting dinners. And it was really, I just really missed it. So now it's really working for me that we have, like I said, one or two people, either one person or another couple over in a way that feels really safe for us and it feels really good. And we all agree and we all check in. Like there's been times where we were going to have someone over and they canceled or we canceled. So like we're always checking in, but it's working. So there are ways to definitely kind of modify being with each other in person now. I do go on hikes with friends, and again, one friend at a time, and we're masked and we're distanced as we're walking or we're hiking, but it's working. So just keep checking in and seeing how that works for you. But write letters, write cards, talk on the phone. There are other ways to connect. Number 16 is practice stress releasing technique. So whatever works for you, do it. For me, it's being outside, it's working out, it's making sure that I get a good sweat out when I wake up in the morning. It's like one of the things I love to do in the morning. And there are times when I've had a really stressful day and I looked back, and if I didn't have a workout that morning, I'm like, oh yeah, that was it. That's the reason. But it's also hiking and being outside. It's also reading. So find out and learn. Maybe you don't know right now what your favorite stress releasing technique is. So find out what it is and do it. Number 17 is create your own routines and rituals. Many of you have already heard me talk about losing my mother during this time. I recently wrote an essay you can go find at joyfulvegan.com about how hard it's been to grieve when you don't have normal rites and rituals. And that has definitely created stress for me. And I know for others who've dealt with the same thing. My mother died in a nursing home 3,000 miles away from me with a nurse, but no family by her side. And she was declining by the time COVID hit. And it made it impossible for me to fly from California to New Jersey to be with her. And that's really hard. So I talk about how grieving is hard, and grieving the death of a parent is even harder, but grieving without the usual end of life rites and rituals has been impossible. And so one of the things that I have had to do is create my own rituals. Now, I'm going to be really honest. I am definitely fluctuating still in my grief. I do keep it at bay often because it's been very painful, and I'm still dealing with it, but it has been very hard. And right now I'm finally, my mother died in April, and this is August when I'm recording this. In fact, the service that we're going to have for my mother, it will be 3 months to the day that she died. It'll be on August 21st. So one of the things that came out of this, and this is actually a silver lining, David and I had been talking about our own final plans. So I'm not kidding you. I know it sounds morbid, but I'm not kidding you when I say that I put a lot of things in place all the time because I just want to be prepared. And one of the things David and I kind of forced the conversation in the last year was talking about what our own final plans were. So we had many conversations about it, and we decided that we wanted to be buried in a cemetery. You have heard me talk about the cemetery called Mountain View Cemetery. It's a historic cemetery here in Oakland. It's a beautiful place, and many founders, there's many notable people buried there, and many just lots of people there. And it is a meaningful place for me, and it's a meaningful place to David. We used to just go there just to walk, and it's just beautiful. So my mother's death accelerated that decision. And what came of this is that we are burying her ashes there. And because we didn't have a service, I couldn't go back to New Jersey, and I didn't have a service with her friends, and you didn't have the normal, talking about her and celebrating her life. So taking the time it's taken, and it's taken a long time to kind of, decide, and then, buy the plot and go back and forth and see the site that we wanted, because the plot that we bought is for my mother, but it's also for us. So it's where we will be buried after we're cremated. And my mother, I have her ashes, and half of her ashes, because the other half went to my sister. She will be there buried in Mountain View. And because of that, I talked to friends and asked them if they would feel comfortable coming. We'd be outside, we'd be masked, we'd be distanced, but I need to have this to move forward because it's just been so hard. And so my mom talked about, before she died, like we had these conversations, and she talked several times about wanting a bagpiper to play at her service. And so I'm giving that to her. So I've already arranged to have a bagpiper play. My mom, it wasn't a huge part of her life, but her background is Scotch-Irish, and she just always loved the bagpipes. And so I've hired a bagpiper, and some friends are going to come, and we're going to tell some stories and pour some wine and listen to a bagpipe and certainly cry. I don't doubt that. But it's what I'm trying to create rituals that didn't come naturally because of COVID. So whatever it is you're experiencing, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a death of someone, but maybe you normally have, I don't know, a certain party at this time of day, or you do a work event, or you go away, or there's a travel event, or there's or it's a birthday, or other kinds of markers, life events. Create your own, do it differently, but do it, because it will normalize this time and just help you get through whatever it is that you would be ritualizing normally if we weren't going through this. So create your own rituals and rites. And then finally, keep perspective, right? Keep perspective just in general and what this virus is about. So back in 2019, I watched a course. I've talked about the great courses before. I watched a course called The Black Death, the world's most devastating plague. I've always been interested in medieval literature. I've read a lot of it and studied a lot of it. I've always been interested in medieval history. And so I wanted to know more about the Black Death. And so it was pure coincidence that after watching 24 episodes of an academic lecture series about a deadly pandemic, we were hit with a deadly pandemic a few months later, known as COVID-19. So prior to COVID, I was telling David about the lecture series every day. I was telling friends, but I was learning how amazing it was. And then our own pandemic descended upon us. So the series was filmed before COVID, obviously. It was filmed in 2016. It's part of the Great Courses. You can get the Great Courses through Canopy, Kanopy. You can probably find them through Audible at this point, but I know that Amazon Prime was also, if you have an Amazon Prime account, was also offering that particular Great Course for free. So check it out. But this one's called The Black Death, and it's part of the Great Courses. So in short, you probably know, in the late 1340s, a cataclysmic plague shook medieval Europe to its core. The bacterial disease, the difference is that was a bacterial disease, even though lots of experts today think there was both bacterial disease and some viral diseases happening at the same time. It became known as the Black Death, swept across the continent, left a path of destruction from Crimea to Constantinople, to Italy, to France, to Spain, and most of Europe. It even went to Iceland. And within these locations, the plague killed up to 50% of the population in less than 10 years. 75 million people dead. So just perspective-wise, again, that is not to say that there is not devastation and there is not fear, and I certainly am not someone who wants to get this, but I just want to offer perspective. All things considered, we're in a much better position. I know there's a lot of people who resist saying things are better today than they used to be. Things are better today than they used to be. Things are better today than they were yesterday. Things are better today than they were 50 years ago. Things are better today than they certainly were 500 years ago. We are in a much better position than those poor people who had to deal with the Black Death. The mortality rate for those who contracted it was something like 80%. Okay, we're still in the single digits of mortality rates. So I bring it up to offer perspective, not just about pandemics specifically, but humans in general. Even before COVID-19 came along, I thought a lot about how that plague was handled by the people in the Middle Ages, and probably thought, well, we would handle things differently today because we have science and we have facts and we have knowledge of infectious diseases, whereas they didn't. And yet, when COVID-19 came along, it was impossible not to see the unsettling similarities between the societal responses to the plague and those to COVID-19. In both cases, Some officials tried to downplay the severity of the outbreak and the far-reaching economic and social effects. Some people created conspiracy theories that continues through every pandemic in history, no different today. Back during the plague, specific groups were scapegoated. I should say a specific group, the Jews in particular, as they have been for so many centuries, were scapegoated as being the cause of the Black Death. In some cities, they were run out. In some, they were burned alive. Thousands of Jews were executed, even though the Pope at the time, Pope Clement VI, pointed out the Jews were dying in the plague at about the same rate as Christians. But that's what happened then. That was the group that was scapegoated, as they so often have been. Today, we're scapegoating Asian Americans, and there have been some horrible stories of Asian Americans being targeted. And let's not even talk about what the President of the United States calls the pandemic, which obviously doesn't help at all. In fact, it contributes to targeting Asian Americans or just Asians. It's happened in more than just the United States. So not just Asian Americans. At the time during the plague, you had those who took it very seriously. You had those who were carrying out their normal duties like we have today. Then you had clergy members who were called to the homes of the ill to provide last rites. They were also contracting the disease in the process. Others were ignoring the disease. Some of them were turning to hedonism and debauchery. That's actually when the flagellants came about, this very extreme religious groups. You see extreme conspiracy theories today, just like you saw extreme religious groups then. They didn't know about infectious diseases, but still people were reacting in all these different ways. And I thought, oh, that's so fascinating. That's so interesting. And here we are today seeing the same exact thing. One of the things that Dorsey Armstrong, she was the Purdue University professor who taught the course, kept emphasizing, and she did it in several episodes, and something that stuck with me, and in something I've always believed, but it just was confirmed watching this, is that we are the same today as we always have been. We are humans and we are the same, right? We make really stupid decisions and we don't learn from the past. And that's just like a cycle that we just keep repeating. And so there have just been parallels, and, there have been many, many writers and journalists who've been making these parallels. You can read endless articles about the parallels between COVID and the 1918-1919 flu, and of course the Black Death, and more people are hearing about this than ever before. But we are the same people. And while I do believe that there has been a lot of, let's just say, missteps in the way we have all handled this, or many of us have handled it, I do believe there will be very good impacts that come out of this as well. I think good will come out of it, and we individually can choose for good to come out of it, which is why I did this episode, because we can make decisions today to be healthier and happier despite and possibly even because of COVID-19. We're no different from the people dealing with a deadly pandemic in the 14th century called the Black Death, or those in the 20th century enduring the 1918-1919 flu, or those who endured the deadly plague of Justinian in the 6th century, or those who lived through the deadly Antonine plague of 165 to 180, known also as the plague of Galen. Marcus Aurelius, who you've heard me talk about before as being another hero of mine, was emperor of the Roman Empire during that very plague. And he mentions the plague only once in his notes, in his writings, because don't forget, we have his meditations. It was just his journal, basically, but we call it meditations today. And he talks about how bad the disease was, but what he talks about that was worse was the mental plague of corruption and vice, the moral decay that the plague brought out in so many people. And that is what I caution us against today, is that we can choose to deal with this however we want in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. It's not the pandemic that can harm us other than in the obvious ways. It's how we respond to it. And so my hope is that some of these suggestions, maybe one of these thoughts, may just provide some food for thought, might provide a seed to plant, to inspire you to make the best of this day and this moment, despite what is happening all around us. For the animals, this is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Thanks for listening.